Hi, everybody. Welcome back. As like the fine thoroughbred racehorses that you are, you're headed down the home stretch towards the finish line. I said the first week I got to work on my metaphors. Well, they still haven't improved, but welcome back. I'm glad that you're here, and again, congratulations on just being a month out from the final. And tough week for a lot of people. If you're out there in the world, here in the Denver area, try to show a little extra kindness to people, a little extra compassion, that type of thing. Show your good side, in a nutshell. Okay, I mean, we're all in this together, and let's make it a good journey. So, with that, we'll dive into the textbook. The featured poster child is Denise Morrison of Campbell Soup, and she's one of 4 daughters, all of whom became successful executives. And Denise was sort of the most successful of the bunch. And Campbell Soup is a great example of a few things. One, a great example of, we talked about corporate entities. They live in perpetuity in theory, unless they're sold or dissolved. I mean, they just keep going and going, even if the founders have long since moved on, literally or figuratively. Campbell Soup is 150 years old. Okay, so clearly, nobody that founded the company is still around. It's under the stewardship of it was under the stewardship of Denise Morrison, and in keeping with the pattern of poster children from this edition of the book, she's left, so she's no longer there. And I've got the new edition of Nichols' Understanding Business, Understanding Business. On my counter back there, I'm gonna take it out of the shrink wrap and start flipping through it and see. I would expect they've updated most of the poster children, because life comes at you fast and the business world changes quite a bit. But back to Campbell Soup. So I mean, they've been a stalwart in an industry that's consistent. People drink soup. Soup is healthy. It's something. It's portable. It's a product for the ages, so to speak. But the problem with soups is that the trends now have gone towards more organic and fresh, right? And prior to COVID-19, if you walked into a King Soopers or a Safeway or Whole Foods, I mean, you couldn't get to the back of the store without practically tripping over a soup bar. Now, of course, COVID's put the kibosh on that for now, but I'm guessing once the pandemic is over, we'll be back to seeing those big super bars with like 4 or 5 different varieties of soup. A, it's very profitable for them, and B, it's profit that the store doesn't have to pass through to somebody like Campbell's. The Safeway kitchens can make it, then sell it, and that's money for them, not for Campbell's. So there's that issue to it as well. And you could sort of tell where they stand because their pecking order in the grocery store has diminished. In other words, whereas they used to have a very prominent spot in a grocery store years ago, now they're on like aisle 16, and they may or may not be at eye level. They may be low or they may be higher above. And higher margin items tend to be right at eye level and tend to be in the most prominent aisles. And if you're like me, one thing you've noticed is when you go shopping, all the products you really need, milk, butter, eggs, unless you're vegan, of course. I mean, but those products, sort of cooking staples, I'll call them for lack of a better term, are way in the back. Forces you to walk through the store and eyeball lots of stuff on your way to for example, to get some milk, or I have coffee every morning, and I got to get the half and half to dump into it. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't go into the store, say for example, to get a half gallon of milk and some half and half, and get hypnotized by the shiny object. I'd see something and say, "Oh, that's a good price for that. Oh, I like that. I use that. Ooh, that's pretty good. I'd like to try that." Blah, blah. Next thing I know, there's 20 things in the cart. Okay, and I'll drive home, and halfway home, I'm like, "Holy crap balls! I forgot to get milk in half and half." So the one thing I got in my car to get and go and get into the store to pick up, I completely space out on, but I've got my cart filled with everything else. That's not see, that's the holy grail of what grocery stores are trying to get you to do, is get you distracted to look at these other products. And that's why things are put, bread is another example. Things that you need are tucked away in the far reaches of the store. They don't make it easy for you to get to it. You have to go through other products to find it. So again, with soups, they've been around forever, 150 years, but eating trends have changed. People, again, are going towards more organic and fresh products. And COVID's changed it. COVID's made it better to have canned food soups. You don't have to make as many trips to the store. People, for the time being, can deal with preservatives if it means not having to go out as much. I mean, it's sort of a risk-reward type of a balance. So they got sort of a temporary reprieve from the marketplace, but times will change again, and their stock's down by like 30%. That's a good indication of what the financial markets think of Campbell's. Good product, but one that's getting out of vogue, getting out of favor. So really, she's the poster child for Campbell's. They have a very well-defined organizational structure, and that's what this chapter is about, organizational structure. If you go to work for a small company, you'll know it when you see it. Sort of what I call biosmosis, meaning that it'll just sort of seep into you over time. You'll know who the key people to go to for various things are quickly enough, or you just simply network among your coworkers and come up to speed that way. But there are formal theories about organizational structure, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Really, two key people were sort of the fathers of organizational theory. One a Frenchman, Henri Fayol, another a German, Max Weber. Pronounce the W like a V, Weber. And similar theories in some ways, but they've got some fundamental differences, of course. Fayol basically believed that you took somebody who was a subject matter or a skill expert and assigned them to do that task. If you were a good welder, you got assigned to the welding department. If you were good at logistics, you got assigned to the logistics department. If you were good crunching numbers, you went to the financial department. Now, Weber was a little bit different. Weber said, let's not get hung up on who's best at what. We have a task that needs to be done to very precise specifications. So let's train these workers to focus on doing things by the book, by the precise specifications that are listed out. And so he was a stickler for defining the process tasks and mandating that workers had to stick to these tasks to the letter. Great example of that are airline pilots. I've got probably 40 hours in the cockpit of a small propeller plane, so I've flown. And when you have an emergency, the first thing you do is grab the book, assuming you're not heading straight into the concrete of a parking lot or something. I mean, if you have time to look at the book, the first thing you do is, what does the book tell you to do? My instructor one day said, okay, we're going to lose an engine. And I'm like, no, we're not. And he says, yeah, you need to learn this. I'm like, okay. So, and he didn't turn the engine off, or we didn't lose the engine. He simply put it into idle, so it had no power to it. So basically, the book tells you to configure the aircraft a certain way. Okay, the flaps go like this, the trim goes like this, the airspeed needs to be this speed, so you don't stall. You can't turn it more than so many degrees, and you need to, first of all, you need to find a place to set the plane down. But doing all that, these aircraft, mine was the Cessna 172, and it's designed wonderfully. It's designed to descend at 400 feet per minute, which is the exact descent rate of a normal landing. Okay, so the point that he sort of hammered into my head was, okay, as long as you've done all the right things as far as configuring the aircraft and finding a place to set it down, you really ought to be fine. I mean, you're going to descend at the same rate as a normal landing. There's no reason for you to crash into something. Now, that is a reason, by the way, if you look around airports, you'll note, especially like municipal airports and things like that, parks, golf courses, places with lots of space tend to be around airport runways. Farmland is great. That's as good. That's the holy grail of land use around an airport. You don't want to put a hospital or a school at the end of a runway for obvious reasons, right? So again, do things by the book. The book will tell you exactly what to do. And so that's really the difference between fail. Fail was best person for the task. Weber was never mind best person for the task. Just follow these rigid, well-defined specifications, and that's everything will be fine. The other thing that leads into is first the chain of command. So who reports to who, and whose responsibilities and tasks are where within the organization. The organizational chart, which puts all of that on paper. And then, do you have centralized authority or decentralized authority? I've worked at headquarters before. I've also worked for companies where I've basically worked at District 12, and I'd fly back 2 or 3 times a year to Panem to talk to the top powers there, using that Hunger Games metaphor. The thing about being remote is you're clearly out of the line of communication internally and the network internally, but you also have freedoms that others don't have. I mean, when, for example, headquarters was in Washington, D.C., there was some solace in knowing that my phone would not ring after like 2:30 in the afternoon from anybody at headquarters, because everybody had gone home at that point. So, but decentralized is you've got offices and employees and responsibilities, most importantly, out in remote locations. There's some decision-making authority that's delegated to these remote locations. Best example of that is international companies. You need to put people in charge in international companies that know the local culture, know the local customs, religions, what to do, what not to do, what to eat, what not to eat. So you need to know everything about that country. And my theory, which isn't always followed, but I always thought was a good one, is you put somebody in charge of a country's operations who's from that country, because they're not viewed as an outsider. Even early in my career, I've made references to Unisys. Unisys had Hawaiians working in Hawaii for 2 reasons. One is the island of Oahu you can drive in a day, and if you've been there 3 years, you've done everything there is to do 8 times over. Now, yeah, the weather's kind of nice, that's good, but you do get island fever, as they call it. You just get it is the world's most remote island archipelago, and it's at least a 5-hour flight from anywhere. So you just don't go somewhere for a weekend if you're based in Hawaii. So most of the people that the company sent over kind of washed out or begged to come back to the mainland. And then Hawaiians like to buy from Hawaiians. It just is what it is. I mean, if you're a native Hawaiian, you've got much more of an in than if you're a mainlander. So that's just the way the culture is. They're not going to admit to that, but there is a predisposition towards buying from people who have a cultural connection to you. So centralized authority is everything comes from the mothership. Okay. Headquarters makes all the decisions. Headquarters uses their judgment and says, this is how we do things. In some ways, that could be very good. If you're, again, I'll use the example of building an aircraft. If you're building an aircraft, well, yeah, you want everything to be consistent. Even if you outsource some of the work, if you outsource the work to the other countries, you have to have specifications very tightly defined. Okay, so that's about it. We're going to go through the first 10 pages today of Chapter 8, and then, as I mentioned, on Wednesday we have Ashley Burt coming and talk to us. Next Monday we'll wrap up Chapter 8. Okay, so we'll follow up momentarily. Stay tuned.